Okay. I would like to call the Plan Commission of the Village of Shorewood to order at 6:30 p.m. Let's see, all members are present except for Commissioner Wickland, who is excused, and Trustee McGovern, who is also excused. We have I'm sorry, it was village board last night, and so it's a different procedure. So anyway, so really good to be back together. It's been a few months since we have convened. We have a newly appointed member. Well, this is your first meeting, right?
Yes.
So you can introduce yourself if you'd like. We should go around and say introductions and how long you all have served. If you can. So.
My name is Mike Klain. I've retired. I've been living in Shore for a couple of years. I thought this would be a good way to give back to the community. Really like it.
That's great. And I do believe we have to record these, right? So we have to speak into our, so make sure you speak
Okay.
into your microphone loud enough so that you can hear yourself and feel uncomfortable. And then you know that it's.
Should I start over?
All right. I think we're okay. Thank you though. Mr. Pollack.
Yeah, I'm Commissioner Pollack. I've been on the commission for a little more than 3 years now. So I finished my first term. I'm on my second. I've been in the village for, it's closer to 20 than 15 years now. Really like serving on the commission, helping making Shorewood better.
Please.
All right, I'm Commissioner Klein. Just looking back at my notes, I'm in my third session on the Plan Commission, started here in 2018. I've been a Shorewood resident for 26 years, and it's great to be involved.
Hi, I'm Kate Flynn Post. I've been a resident for about 9 years. I have a master's in public administration, and I was looking for a way to give back to the village using my public admin nerd ways. And I've also taken some coursework in public and private development. So this is a good match for my background and interests, and I'm starting my second term.
And Commissioner, say your last name for me, please.
It's much simpler than it looks. It's pronounced Klane, Klain.
Klain. Okay. Commissioner Klain, you have a background that's relevant as well. You want to share what that is?
Okay, I have a master's degree in urban planning from UWM, the same as Bart, and I worked in Florida for 35 years in urban planning with 32 of it at local government level. So I'm looking forward to the challenge of Shorewood, because one thing I did learn, no two places are alike.
Good. So as I mentioned, Trustee McGovern is going to take the place of Trustee Lynn since Trustee Lynn rolled off the board. And he was unable to make it tonight, but we'll be here next time we convene. Unsleep. Okay, so our next agenda item is to approve the January 28th, 2025 Plan Commission meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner, who was it? Flynn Post?
I'm Post.
Okay, second by Commissioner Pollack. And any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 3, introduction of a request by zoning petition to amend the regulation of permitted principal uses detailed in 535-25 of the Village of Shorewood zoning code to allow commercial kitchens in the P1 public and semi-public district. We will proceed in this format with item A, overview, B, public comment, and C, then Plan Commission discussion. So in the overview, that is a time that you can ask technical clarifying questions that are content related, and then we would hold discussion until after public comment. And for members of the public, when it's public comment, you can come to the microphone, state your name and address, and then share your comments within a reasonable amount of time. Thank you. Director Griepenschlag.
Sure. Thank you, President McKeag. I have a brief overview. I do trust that the members present have read the materials in the packet that provide perhaps a little more level of detail, but For the benefit of those participating tonight, we are here to entertain a petition to consider adding commercial kitchens to the village's P1 public and semi-public districts. The screen before you shows the principal use table that we currently operate within. The P1 districts, the public district way on the right-hand side. The red box shows where commercial kitchens technically would be allowed. As you can see right now, they're not permitted. They are permitted in the artisan manufacturing production districts, which are the commercial districts of MX, CX, and GX. So the petition would, in some fashion, seek to add the allowance of commercial kitchens in that district, and the table would need to be updated as such. The review and approval process, just for everyone's memory, is the Plan Commission receives the introduction of the petition at their first meeting. Per code, we're not allowed to make any sort of recommendation until a subsequent meeting. That subsequent meeting could be held as soon as May 27th at our typical meeting. I have possible and projected on here, just indicating that, it might take more than one meeting to make a recommendation, but ideally, or in a perfect world, we could do that on May 27th, which would lead us to a June 2nd public hearing and village board consideration. Once again, those dates are just projected based on best case scenario, but we will take the time that we need to discuss it thoroughly. Item overview, once again, is a request to rezone the regulations pertaining to principal uses permitted in the P1 district. Commercial kitchens are currently allowed as artisan production. This is the full definition of artisan production, but I have highlighted various words that say produce consumer goods by hand, including confections, bakeries, caterers, and custom-made food items. Essentially, not mass production, but hand production of food items is currently allowed in this particular district. They're not requesting allowance of all these uses, but we will discuss whether or not that is something that should be considered within the discussion. They are requesting it in the P1 district. Their property is obviously zoned P1. They are located, right here in the just northwest quadrant, but it would impact all other P1 zoned properties in the village, which include all school district properties, Atwater, Lake Bluff, intermediate school, and high school, all village properties, so the police department, DPW, the fire department, as well as village center and village hall. And then all four of the religious institutions that we have. So Kingo, North Shore Presbyterian, Luther Memorial, and St. Robert. So all P1 districts would be impacted by the requested change. Once again, the requested amendment, the applicant has an unused commercial kitchen in their building. That's not uncommon for religious institutions who over the years have, used it for other reasons, and it's being less used now. So they're looking to make that available to entrepreneurs who have sought them out. The benefit would help the church ensure long-term viability and benefit small businesses as indicated in their application. Once again, the applicant is seeking to add that to the P1 district as a permitted use. Just one thing I didn't mention in my memo, which I apologize, but we are required to follow state statutes when reviewing updates to zoning enacted or amended zoning codes. So there is a Act 391 from 2015. I can't read the small print, but essentially it says consistency means furthers or does not contradict the objectives, goals, and policies contained within the comprehensive plan. So whenever we receive requests for rezones, we need to once again confirm whether or not the request furthers or does not conflict with the objectives, goals, and policies contained within the comprehensive plan. With respect to the institutional district within which this zone is located, the institutional district says this land use designation is intended to permit public buildings, schools, places of worship, and clubs. The future land use map generally shows locations of existing facilities. Community facilities may also be located in areas planned for mixed use, residential, or business uses where appropriate. So once again, the language in our code says it's intended to permit public buildings. It doesn't say it's limited to. So you can interpret it how you will, but it is my interpretation as the planner that nothing in here contradicts what is in our code. So I think it is something that is worth discussion and consideration. Had it not been, I would have been a little more on the front end with the applicant to understand additional reasons. Once again, introductory meeting here. So we're here for discussion and direction. If the request is ultimately desired, my one question is, should all artisan production be added, or should we create a separate category specific to food production or commercial kitchens? Either way is doable. It's just a matter of how we update the table. As you can remember, when we did the commercial zoning update 2 years ago now, the intention was to kind of limit the number of uses in there so we don't have a huge table. So just want to make sure that we're conscious of that creep. If we start adding too many uses, we're going to, make a more difficult table to read. But once again, if you want to limit it to the food created uses, which is all they've requested, we certainly can do that. And then the other question that came up prior to the meeting is, should these be added as a permitted or conditional use? Once again, conditional uses cannot be denied. They can only be reviewed with an additional level of public hearing and detail. So if conditional, what conditions would you seek to place on them? We have placed hours of operation and location requirements on particular conditional uses, personal credit establishments, so check cashing. We do have those kind of conditions on those uses. Or additionally, we could prohibit or limit retail sales, distribution, or consumption. They have not sought to do any of those three things, but it is something that other food-related uses might seek to do. So once again, I'm just looking for discussion and direction from the commission, from the public, and from the applicant as to what I should be preparing to draft to review as a possible amendment, if so desired.
Thank you very much. Any clarifying questions or technical questions pertaining to the content? All right, at this time, I would open it up to public comment. If any of you would like to speak, please.
Yes.
Yeah, and you have to speak pretty loudly into it. Yeah, sorry, if you need us to make any accommodations.
But
Mhm.
hi, everyone. My name is Reverend Janine Oaks Doherty, and I'm the pastor at North Shore Presbyterian Church. I live at the church, which is at 4048 North Bartlett, and the residence is 4040 North Bartlett. I've served there at NSPC since January of last year and was largely called here in order to help reinvent the congregation's life and role in this community. We've identified ourselves as a neighborhood church, and we focused a lot on simply being a good neighbor. My family and I live at the church and have come to feel like the whole building and property is our home, and we want the community to have that same sort of feeling. As a neighborhood church, we want to be a community resource and have hosted nation or neighbor-wide events. For example, we've had a successful Easter egg hunt for many years, and this past year, we added a trick-or-treat Halloween event. We had a neighborhood end of summer block party on our own lawn, and this year we're hoping to open that up to a whole block. We've also discovered that there aren't many opportunities for summer camp up on the North Shore during the month of August. And so we held a very affordable week-long summer camp and got about 24 kids in our building that wouldn't have otherwise had a camp to be at. And so that led to an after-school program and 2 weeks of camp for this summer. I wanted to give you a sense of who we've been, where we want to go with this. The church was built in the 1950s for a congregation at the time that had 1,500 members. But now at a time when our mainline Protestant churches are in a decline all around the country, we're a faith-based community of around just 150, and we have way more space than we need. So not only are we expanding our presence in the community, but we're also creating opportunities to partner with groups so that we are being good stewards of the resources that we have, especially on this really large campus, which if you haven't seen it, takes up half of our block and the most dense square mile in our state. So in addition to all of the typical pastoral ministry things, one of the first things that I did when I started serving here last year was to join the North Shore Chamber of Commerce with the goal of building relationships and partners with local community groups and entrepreneurs in order to discover ways that we can share our resources for the benefit of our neighbors. For example, we hosted volunteer opportunities with Kids Impact Community. We held a holiday dinner for an organization called Pathfinders, and we hope to begin sharing our classrooms and stage with a local theater group. One of my biggest pet peeves, churches, and I have just a couple as a pastor, is an unused or unutilized commercial kitchen, especially in a country where food can be so insecure for many people. At this time in the life of our congregation, all we use the kitchen for is to heat up food for a community meal for a nonprofit on occasions, our interfaith Thanksgiving service with congregational shalom, but honestly, most often just to heat up food and snacks and coffee on a Sunday morning. I think our dishwasher and our fridge probably get the most use. It's our hope that through the partnership we've built with a local cottage baker, we can develop and operate a shared kitchen where local food entrepreneurs can use our kitchen for just a handful of hours each week. This gives them the opportunity to expand their business or start their business in an affordable way. We also intend to create a partnership with each of these individuals and then with the collective of them, so that not only does this give the opportunity to expand and thrive in their own business, but it also provides an opportunity for our congregation and our neighborhood to get to know them and to join in our food ministries and our neighborhood outreach. So that on a Sunday morning, our fellowship time after worship can be also a time to get to know these food entrepreneurs as extended members of our family, of our neighborhood, and Shorewood. And during our summer camp, which we call Compassion Camp, our neighborhood kids can learn about the art of compassion through cooking and in sharing a meal. Thank you for your time this evening and for considering this, that we believe will bring some new life not only to our building, but our church family and our neighborhood as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Do we have anyone online attending virtually? Can you stop? Yeah, I wonder why we can't see anyone.
I stopped sharing, but didn't put the screen back on our screen. So there they are.
All right. Is there anyone joined virtually who would like to speak on this matter? All right, hearing and seeing no activity. There is a comment in the chat. I don't know if that's pertinent to. Oh, thank you,
Sorry,
Ms.
Barbara.
Kylie Miller. Technical difficulties. Okay, at this time, I would like to move to the item C, which is Plan Commission discussion. So during this time, this will be a time to share responses, requests for more information, anything that you're thinking in response to this request. Yes.
Excuse me, I have a few questions. So I'm wondering from Director Griebentrog, have there been any other requests for commercial kitchens? I would imagine you'd put it in the presentation, but within the P district?
Not to my knowledge, but I do recall when I just started here, I actually thought that we had a commercial kitchen operating out of North Shore Presbyterian Church. I could not confirm that with an occupancy permit, but I believe it might have been used as a home base for a food truck. I'm not sure if anyone from the church has knowledge of that, but we could not find history of that. But yeah, since that was probably early 2018, I don't know how long it lasted or if it ever moved forward. At that time, we had a different zoning code, so that's, different set of review criteria. But beyond that, I have not had a formal request or an informal request to my knowledge.
Has there been any conversation with the school district about the use of commercial kitchens? Like, is there any demand for this beyond this specific petitioner? What I'm trying to get.
I have not heard from the school district. I'd be happy to reach out. We have contacts for all the churches as well as the school district. So I'd be happy to reach out to confirm whether or not they have a perspective on this prior to, further discussion, but I have not done that yet.
And then an additional question is just beyond the commercial kitchens question, then getting into the artisan production and manufacturing, I'd have the same questions. What is the demand? Is there a demand? Or can we anticipate any sort of demand for these types of use?
I don't have a direct answer to that. To the pastor's point, I know that many churches have extra space. Some of them are using that for daycare. So many of them might not have, as much space as they do. But yeah, in my time as a planner over the last 17 years, I've had a lot of requests from churches and trying to find a way to transition that space. But I've not had specific requests for those other uses. It's just something that per the zoning code, we previously grouped together thinking they were like uses. If they remain like uses, it'd be my hope that we could potentially add them. But if for some reason we would want to pull something out and make it only in the P1, we can definitely do that. But once again, a goal of the commercial zoning update 2 years ago was to consolidate those categories into similar type uses. So hand production of, artisan goods, whether that's a cupcake or a piece of furniture, at that time was determined to have the same impact on the neighborhood. So they were grouped at that time. But I can add that to the question when I reach out to the other institutions and school, whether or not they have any ideas or have been approached for use of their space.
Yes, Commissioner Kleen.
President Kagan, are we allowed to ask the pastor questions? I was hoping that pastor could elaborate a little bit on the request. I think in the written material, we saw that there was an entrepreneur and some reference to possibly more. Can you kind of elaborate specifically what the hopes are for how many and how often and what they're going to do and not going to do, I guess?
I certainly can. The person that we are working with, she's here, but she does not live in Shorewood. So I don't know if she's allowed
Oh,
to.
she is. Mhm.
Okay. Would you like to, you could better. So Joby knows lots of people. I met Joby through the North Shore Chamber of Commerce, and she knows lots of individual food entrepreneurs who have no place to work and is constantly bombarded with people who say, have you started that yet?
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Joby Murray. I live in Glendale, 5523 North Navajo Avenue. Just, for have it. So yeah, I'm looking at converting the underutilized kitchen at North Shore Presbyterian Church into a shared commercial space for food entrepreneurs. So right now there's a lack of shared kitchen space, especially up here in the North Shore, for food entrepreneurs that are trying to grow their business or advance their business. So I'm currently a cottage baker, so I bake out of my home, and has worked very well for me in the last 7 years. But as things grow and change, to have a space that's outside of my house would be beneficial. And as cottage bakers, we've only been in industry for the last 7 years. So there's this new influx of an industry that doesn't have a pipeline yet in order to go that next step. So not all cottage bakers want to necessarily go to a brick and mortar retail style bakery, but there isn't anything that really exists in the marketplace right now that kind of fills that gap. So talking to Janine and learning about their space and understanding the underutilized space in many of these similar kind of P1 zoned locations, to your point, like the schools, what could they utilize in the summer months in a commercial kitchen space that would provide revenue for the location, as well as building community through those operations of the food entrepreneur. So, as to your point about like timing and staffing and things like that, the idea is to keep them small entrepreneurs. So 1 to 2 makers at a time in the building. Again, no retail, like not setting up a storefront or things like that, but just kind of production. And then the hours are kind of limited based on the church's needs or wants. We currently have it kind of structured with what we've been talking about is kind of a 15-hour day, 6 days a week opportunity to access the building, but it would be scheduled kind of on and off. So we're looking at kind of negotiating some of those things. But the first step is to be able to do it at all. So thank you. Is that the questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Other points of discussion? I have discussion points, but I usually defer, just Commissioner Kleen, I usually defer to the commissioners before I speak.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question about the Reverend mentioned the Business Improvement District or the Chamber of. Have they endorsed this concept?
So I have not talked with the Business Improvement District. We're not part of that. And because we're not on that strip, that would
Mhm.
be the next step after because we've done a lot of work within the North Shore Chamber, but not yet the bid. I'm happy to.
I'm going to try to formulate a question here with some of my thoughts. So this is about, we define the word artisan, which is kind of making stuff, right? Makerspace. So this, if you approve this with artisan, you can create like a makerspace, It doesn't have to be a kitchen. It could be all the things that fall in the, excuse me, artisan category. And, you know, you could even envision a church that has a lot of empty space, like renting out gallery space. That would fit too, right?
Correct.
And so then I go to, well, what about retail? Why is retail being, you know, if you have a gallery, you want to be able to sell. If you have gallery night, do you need a retail license? Am I knowing enough?
Mhm.
Just
You
all
need
those
the
things are all
seller's, you need the
compounded.
seller's permit to sell, correct? You would
Yeah.
need something from, I believe it's through the Department of Revenue, to the state to,
It'd also need to be a permitted use, correct? And
Correct.
it would not be
Right,
for
right, yeah.
one.
right.
So if we're going to a use space, like expansion here,
Like an artisan use space,
But you
not
were
just
ex-
kitchen, but
Yeah,
any kind
so
of
you would-
maker thing.
expanding the uses that are already allowed in the commercial and mixed use space table that was up there, the
To
P1
the P1.
and P3 category.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah.
We're
So
probably just
it's-
looking at P1. P3 is actual parks.
Thank you.
P1 is institutional. So
Nothing
no need to expand it to P3 in my personal opinion. But yeah, if there are other uses that, you know, make sense to have that discussion right now, now is a great time to have it. We did
Yeah.
not discuss the P districts within the commercial zoning update because they weren't part of the commercial zones. So
Yeah.
we kind of moved what was allowed into the new table, but didn't really expand or discuss whether or not there were other opportunities. So yeah, if the plan commission wanted to recommend that retail also be allowed, we would need to add that as well. Right now the request is for, you know, kitchen space without retail, but as I mentioned, we can have a full discussion as to whether or not other uses should be considered.
I would support expanding the uses broadly in the P1 space.
Yeah, I
I'm open to
agree.
P3, but
Creates
it's an-
opportunity. Just think if Shorewood had a gallery night. We already have like gallery events, but they're usually people's homes, right?
That's not a permitted use, but no, I'm joking. Commissioner Pollak, does that conclude your?
interjection. Yeah, thanks so much.
Well, I mean, do you have further discussion points you'd like to add or questions at this time?
So,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
You
so
were-
it's artisan and maker space and the ability for those makers to retail are things we should talk about and consider.
Okay. So it sounds like to answer your questions that you posed to the group, adding a discussion point about the use of the allowing retail to occur is one of them.
And just for my clarification, I think we're seeking retail for artisan goods, not retail in general.
Right, yeah.
So it would
Yeah.
need to be, so we would likely define the ability to sell those goods retail within the artisan category, as opposed to moving retail in, if you allow, I mean, or you talk about adding retail to the point where someone could have a liquor store. I mean, that's what retail involves. Retail is everything that you sell, right? So is your request for retail of artisan goods, or is it for retail in general? And
Yeah.
maybe there's differing opinions.
Yeah, mine would be for the artisan goods, the makers, their ability to sell their wares and expand their business. Or even just have that one night where they can sell their wares.
Right, limited retail,
Yeah,
essentially.
limited.
I think how that would be brought back is, it sounds like the commission is asking for information about, what would be the code pathway
Mhm.
to allowing that scenario.
Yeah,
And-
in my current opinion, I'll need to research it a little more, perhaps, it would be that it would allow artisan producers to sell on site
Right.
as opposed to selling
Selling
things that you don't
someplace
make.
Mm. So that would be for future discussion. Mhm.
I would be fine with expanding the use category to mirror that of the MX1, MX2, and the other commercial use areas. Space.
Is there anything else you want to add?
I just think maximizing unused space within the village is a really good idea. So
Mhm.
why would we constrain it?
So I I fully support the expansion of the use to include all artisan categories. I will say personally, my mother is a retired pastor and she was called to a church to do exactly what you are doing. And it started with camp and then after school programs, and there was commercial kitchen use and all that. And so I've seen it work and I've seen it transform areas and communities in really wonderful ways. And so I would never want to interfere with that. I do think re-envisioning space and creating sort of partnership and compatible uses within old structures is essential, and it's our job to find ways to do that. So I appreciate the opportunity to consider it for this community. I'm not there on the retail, but I want to hear about it. And I think that as I was reading this and processing it, I was thinking, what's the downside? And I'm imagining that in the past, these things would have been seen as competitors to traditional commercial business people and things like that. So I could see that kind of concern. I think that that is a really outdated way to think, and that it's not our job to keep resources and to gatekeep. That's kind of why we looked at rezoning our code. So I'm just saying that right out in front, that I don't want to be forward. I don't want to be looking backwards and fear-based in this as we move forward. I think that the commercial kitchen space, it is something that has come up over the 20 years that I've lived here and the 10 years that I've been on the board. So if somebody can figure out a way to make that work, that seems like a benefit. And then sort of just the nuts and bolts of once it's just to be clear, the use is regulated by our code, but then the person in engaging in the use, the business person, is then regulated by like health code and seller's code and other state codes.
Correct. They would need to apply for an occupancy permit, at which point all departments would review it, including the health department, clerk's office, police department, et cetera. So this would allow for an additional principal use for a separate entity. So at that point, we would require an occupancy permit so that we could review all of that information. They're not an accessory use of the church, is what I'm saying. They'd be their
Right.
own occupant
Right.
within
Okay.
the church's space.
And then that opens up a whole bunch of regulations that they have to answer to that we don't have to worry about at this group.
Correct. With food uses, it's primarily the health department.
Mhm.
So that would definitely be someone they'd have to work through.
Okay. So I'm going to close discussion. Ms. Kylie Miller, I do see that your hand is up. And we have not gone over time. So if you would like to speak, it seems like you missed the public comment time.
Hi, thank you. Barbara Kylie Miller, 4051 North Downer. I think Bart may have just answered my question in response to you, but I was wondering, I've lived here 35 years, so I remember the restaurant on Oakland that burned down and took an adjacent building with it. So I'm just wondering, I assume one of those inspections would be by our fire department.
Correct.
And that the artisan baker or other cooks would have to supply to the church or maybe the village the appropriate liability and fire insurance and all that kind of technical stuff.
So the village does not require insurance with occupancy permits, but that would be something that the landlord, in this case, I'm sure would definitely, require as part of any sort of lease agreement. Yeah.
Okay. But the fire department would sign off on their use.
Correct. The fire department does inspections of things like hoods in commercial spaces. Correct.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Okay, so I think that concludes our business on this item. You can come back next month if you would like, and that would be the first time that we would take action potentially. So it'll be agended for possible consideration and possible consideration and action,
Possible recommendation, correct?
possible recommendation. Right. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
And welcome to Shorewood. All right, moving on to item 4, introduction to and discussion of the Plan Commission's proposed initiative to increase housing opportunities in the village. This has been a long time coming, so looking at Commissioner Pollack on that. So I'll hand it over to Director Griepenschlag.
Barbara, can you confirm if you see slide 4, housing opportunities, before I start advancing things?
I do, thanks.
Okay, I'm sharing a different way, so we'll go this way. So thank you, President McKeag. As mentioned, this has been a long-standing initiative of the Plan Commission for, I believe, almost 5, if not longer, years. Within my memo, I've explained, the rationale for how initiatives and work plans are administered in the village, and we are at the time now where I, as the planning director, am happy to work with you on this potential initiative to increase housing opportunities. Within the discussion in previous years and within your materials tonight, we've referenced various references that have been brought up as, either facts or reasons why this is something that should be considered. It started with the comprehensive housing market study and needs analysis done by the CDA just prior to COVID. And then we had our own comprehensive plan adopted in 2021. We have also reviewed various guides from the American Planning Association, including Equity and Zoning Policy Guide, which references housing policies. And then Shorewood was actually featured in one of the Congress of New Urbanism's Enabling Better Places pamphlets, a user's guide to Wisconsin neighborhood affordability, which discussed housing opportunities within existing neighborhoods as a potential way to reduce the costs of housing. We have previously identified options within this discussion, but I'm not certain that I have all of them or that there's not other ones to discuss. But primarily, what has come up most frequently is accessory dwelling units. To the point of previous conversation, I typically receive one request for an accessory dwelling unit probably every 2 to 3 months, sometimes more, sometimes less. But it is a very common thing that we get asked with respect to existing homeowners wanting to consider that as an option on their property. We've also discussed in the past expanding our household definition. We actually, I think, did a good job recently updating it, but it's always worth looking at to make sure that we're not limiting different types of households. We've removed the word family from our definition just based on equity discussions in the past. And so we just want to make sure that our household definition, which was in your packet, is as expansive as possible. One of the more unique things with our code that I still don't quite understand, although I'm sure it's related to, not wanting to have student housing and things of that nature, but we currently prohibit bedrooms and basements. When you're looking at existing space and where you can expand your family, that's a really easy option oftentimes to do that. We would definitely make sure they're up to code with respect to egress and things of that nature. But right now, our code does prohibit them. So that has come up several times with respect to whether or not we should consider removing that prohibition and allowing that as an option for existing homeowners to expand, living space. We also currently restrict duplex creation. Although we have a district that allows single and 2-unit households, we don't allow those new duplexes to be created. I'm not exactly sure there's a market to create new duplexes because, quite honestly, we see more conversions from duplex to single units than we get requests otherwise. But just for reference, with respect to other reference materials, it's often discussed as you should look at whether or not you're prohibiting something that in the past would have been allowed. In our duplex district, we would have allowed duplexes. I'm not sure when that code was changed, but we definitely have changed it to say no new duplexes within that district. Is it something that we want to look at opening up? Once again, I'm not sure the market's there for it, but it's an easy barrier to remove if desired. A longer term, bigger discussion that I just want to provide as a reference, but kind of a cautionary tale that I don't think we can do this quickly in any respect, but there has been discussion in the past about increasing missing middle opportunities. So whether that's, fourplexes, townhouses, things that have smaller scale in relation to single unit or duplex properties that just allow more units. So you don't necessarily notice that they're bigger. They're not 40-unit apartment buildings by any means. Those are definitely the commercial district. But with respect to, directly adjacent properties, it has been discussed in the past as a way to buffer the commercial district from single unit districts as to whether or not that's allowed. It came up in our comprehensive plan discussion and it was not recommended. So once again, I'm suggesting this is a long-term discussion. if we were to want to advocate for that, I think we would probably need to have a amendment to our comprehensive plan. So it might come into conversation. I just want to give you the heads up that I think it's perhaps out of scope with where I think this initiative's going. And then other ideas that I'm not, hearing or have not heard in the past, or things that you want me to research as we move forward. So primarily, once again, an ADU household, bedrooms and basements, kind of simple regulations to review, but there could be bigger things that, that you might be thinking of. Once again, this is your initiative, so I'm happy to help you formulate and research anything that you want, but this is definitely something that I'm looking for your direction on as to what you see. I don't want to limit your scope. I don't want to, assume that I know what you're referring to. And we have new members, obviously, in the commission that might have other ideas as well. And then just in terms of next steps, I'm looking for us to help define and refine the scope. I believe this could take several meetings. I'm not expecting that, we'll be able to do this, overnight. So I would like for us to all get on the same page with respect to what you would like me to research and bring back to you at some point. At that point, then we will obviously engage with public outreach with respect to whether or not the community agrees with the proposed changes so that we can draft those updates for recommendation to the village board. Any change to the zoning code requires a public hearing, which we would hold in front of the village board, and the village board would then consider it. So once again, we're at the really early stages of this. I was happy that we had a meeting or an application on our agenda to force me to bring this to you. Otherwise, we've kind of, deferred without items to have on the agenda. But since we had that one, I was looking forward to discussion and hearing your perspective on what it is that you'd like to see out of this particular work.
Thank you. I think at this time, I'm going to ask Commissioner Pollack to respond, since I kind of see this as your initiative in a way. You've been really vocal about it. And then I would like to hear from the other members.
Lovely. I think we should try to expand the housing supply at Shorewood. I'm open to any way of doing that. If you went back to your list, I'd say talk about the ones we think we can work on sooner than later in terms of what will have an impact. That's the short version. Abundance would be nice.
And to that point, I'm not opposed to taking things one at a time and having it, as more of like a running initiative per se, but like, I don't want to hold up one of these items if it's ready to go so that we have, other things in the hopper. So if you want to do that, that's be fine by me as well.
Yeah, totally. So if you thought that household definition would somehow increase the housing supply and it's just something we had to change in code, let's do that one first. But if it's like, hey, the easiest way to get more housing built in Shorewood is through dwelling units because missing middle is long and would require commercial construction, stuff like that, then let's prioritize accordingly. That's my perspective, but I'd love to hear from my fellow commissioners.
But first off, everything that's on this slide is reflective of what you would hope that we would put into this type of initiative. Great. Nothing's missing in your mind.
Not yet, but I will continue to think
You
about it
promise.
and bring it up.
Okay, thank you. Right.
I think the basement one can be relatively quick too, right? You're going to increase the value of your housing stock if you can account more bedrooms. Kind of curious on the history of that.
Yeah, and I've talked to the building inspector several times regarding this, and he has no reason to believe it couldn't work or shouldn't be allowed. Once again, we believe it likely was in response to trying to limit student housing.
Yeah.
And so if that is still a problem that I'm not aware of, I guess let me know and we'll hear about it. But I have not heard of that as a concern in my 7 years that we think that there's, expanding
That's the same thing with the definition of a household that was
correct,
highly restrictive from student housing.
And I think I've heard of that being requested as enforcement once in my time here. It was actually relatively recently, but I think we had potentially 4 unrelated people living in a 2-bedroom apartment or something of that nature, which we send the landlord a letter reminding them of what the current definition is, which I believe is 3 unrelated people. But
if we pick those first 4 things, can we work on them all at the same time, or is there a process that some can go quick and some take a little longer? It's really your workload, Bart, that gets involved, and I don't have a sense of how fast, right?
Yeah, I think the last 3 are really simple, quite honestly. So I have no problem trying to tackle all 4 at once. I will say with respect to accessory dwelling units, I would highly lean on Wauwatosa. They adopted this probably almost 10 years ago. I've talked to their planner several times with respect to how they've refined it over the years. We're a very similar housing market. And so I would probably start with giving you their history and their code, and we could, discuss whether or not we have other nuances here. I think we might have slightly denser areas and we might have smaller lots than they do. So we'll just have to look at how that works or doesn't work. But yeah, I'd have no problem giving you a memo next month or whenever time we meet next with all 4 of those topics, just for your broad overview.
I've got one more thought, but I don't
Wait.
know.
The,
Question for Bart, the preclusion of bedrooms and basements, is that like a life safety thing because of access?
No, well,
We just don't want them.
in talking with my building inspector, you definitely should be able to allow that to exist in a safe manner with an egress window and things of that nature. I think we're unique to having it prohibited. So, and once I'm happy to, try to dig into the history of and see if I can find more on that and, continue to reference his expertise on that. I have no reason to believe that it couldn't be allowed. I think it's just something that we've prohibited over the years.
My observation is that it was based on perception and a parochialism around an association of who might live in a basement.
Thank you.
Did you have a comment?
but my other,
I had
so
a
you're
question, but I can't wait.
including the duplex restriction in the list, right?
Yes. So that we, if I heard 4, I'm taking accessory
Yep.
dwelling units, household definitions, bedrooms and basements, and duplex restrictions. At the very least, to provide an overview of what those current restrictions are and whether or not you'd like to see changes with them.
Commissioner Flimpos, did you have a question or anything?
It sounds like we're really eager to dive into these, and I feel like some of them are sort of a no-brainer. So I'd be in favor of moving forward with them. I also think about the framing and the scope of work. So what you're talking about with next steps for the initiative overall, I would be interested to have some more goals or outcomes defined in terms of these specific items. So increasing housing opportunities, I think, is great, generally speaking. And of course, with housing affordability and CDA's work, to see how that connects to the work of the Plan Commission in terms of what are we trying to achieve? Who are we trying to increase housing opportunities for, and how and why? And all of those questions are things that I think that we could explore, not to slow us down by getting too much into the weeds with that, but I would appreciate having that conversation.
And I think with respect to that, I mean, I think that many of you are aware that we used to have a program that would provide funding for people to convert unused space in attics for bedroom spaces. That my memory is largely based on the school district wanting to be able to attract and retain families that could grow into their housing. So I think by allowing something like a bedroom and a basement, you would be looking at serving that family that needs that, third bedroom that just isn't there right now, or the guest room for, someone to come over when they need to visit or watch their kids or something. So in the past, we have had housing programs specifically targeted towards, new homeowners. We've had down payment assistance programs. We have had the program to allow for the attic conversion. And so we can reconfirm those types of goals as part of this with a broader statement as we, take it to the public, as it were, just so that they understand where it is that you're coming from.
Yeah, I think some of that would come by, I really liked the reference materials that were provided because that starts to create that framework or support that framework. And then all the work that the CDA has done from a almost analysis and fact-finding and I want to say like programmatically, because it's been a very intentional process, bringing that in to inform our outcomes and goals, I think is a really natural dovetail of bringing those two things together. I think one thing, and this isn't for discussion really, but just to be mindful that everything that we'd be looking at from a code perspective really is, it's what you do with those structures, are allowed to do with those structures, but those structures would still be within the purview of the private housing market.
Mhm.
Which is very different than creating subsidy or programs, which is not in the purview of the Planning Commission. I know you know that, but I'm just saying it for the record and all of that. So
I do really like the idea of having a fundamental fact base on like how many new units did we make in the last couple of years, just to give a context on like what it means if you had 2 or 3 AUDs a quarter or something like that. I know that doesn't sound like big numbers, but that's material in terms of what it could change for folks here.
I think so, and I think especially if that's couched within, for me, Plan Commission comes back to what would a person need to do to change their existing really like the likelihood, or
Yeah.
that it's not going to be that within a quarter there are going to be ADUs popping up all over the place and
Correct.
every lot. It was kind of like, this reminds me of when we started talking about chickens 15 years ago.
I'm hoping not.
And so that's why I'm kind of like, I'm really being mindful of like, not even framing, but just anticipating the questions that will come up that are perception based, and making sure that that information is available so that we have sort of real life scenarios, going along with this discussion. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense to me.
Mhm.
In that vein, is there any way we can use all the GIS information to get a better sense of, as we think about EUD requirements, how many really are in scope here? How many residential properties would we be even talking about that could be eligible for this? Because I think about 5,000 residences in Shorewood, that's potentially a lot, but we're not really talking about that much.
Yeah, and I could use, Wauwatosa's regulations as a basing. Like if this is what we did, I can work with our Rupert Milky's our GS provider. They can probably, draft some level of program to run. I can't do that in-house, I'll be honest with that. But yeah.
Don't hurt yourself, but just I think one of the things I miss, or I wish we had more when we did the comprehensive update, was if we had some of that sizing. It could have really helped us see how our rules were impacting the structures that already exist. That'd be great.
And just while we're talking about that, I know this has come up in the past, and I believe Trustee McGovern actually submitted an initiative on this, but when ADUs, if we were to discuss that, parking requirements are going to be discussed with respect to, is it logical to expect an ADU to have an on-site parking space? Is it acceptable for the existing garage to be converted into ADU without having that parking space? And so when we get into the details of ADUs and, how that can be allowed, those kind of parameters will come up. And so just giving you the heads up that parking with respect to ADUs will definitely be something that needs to be addressed.
I think I'm thinking about the question in terms of, is this a running initiative? Is this a one at a time? For the purposes of process and the board, I think we do better with one thing at a time. And so I would look at probably going household, bedrooms, ADUs, duplex restrictions. Not that we can't overlap some of those things or have an agenda where we check in on 3 different items, but when we're thinking about, this may be overly concrete, but just given my other role, being mindful of, I think that approach of like really looking at one thing thoroughly goes a long way in terms of building people's confidence and comfort with this. So that would be a recommendation. And that in practice may be no different than what anyone else was imagining, but I'm just going the extra step to say it specifically. I'm reminded of, was it driveways that the Plan Commission did a few years ago, or
Porches, perhaps?
porches?
Porches, correct.
But anyway, I mean, it was really clear that everything had been thought about.
Which I
Again.
think we've had one
What
application
what
since.
happened with
Can
porches?
that's what I'm worried. Right? We
Not- yes.
spend an inordinate amount. Okay.
No,
Thank you.
that's not happening.
Thank you.
I agree. I think
There was, I think it wasn't porches. I
Oh.
think it was something that actually went more, quick. I believe it might have been, yeah, it was the patio setbacks.
So that was
that-
just before me, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, that was just before. Okay, I'm getting off track. But point duly noted.
We can get rather rigorous.
No, exactly. Nope. Thorough. Within reason,
Proportional. Yeah.
proportional. Thank you. Noted. And to your question, Commissioner Flynn Post, that would be an offline discussion that I'm sure Commissioner Pollock would fill you in on. Commissioner Klein, do you have any thoughts that you would like to share?
Well, I like your idea of the board or the village board at one point doing one at a time. That way I think you would thoroughly make sure you investigate that one and you don't want them tripping each other up.
Exactly. It's a lot when you're not in this space. It's a lot to catch up on, but that's why I do think that I look at this as like kind of an incubator, and we can kind of stage them in terms of different what the purpose of that agenda item is for that evening, how much we want to bite off, et cetera, et cetera. And they might be ready to go at different rates. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And we can talk about this more offline. We don't have to get into the weeds of it, but I just wanted to say that with the, level setting, and we haven't done this together. So why not be clear, right? What else do you need to, have we covered everything?
No, I think I've received good direction to bring at
Okay.
least those 4 topics back and to guide next month's discussion. We will have a meeting next month, obviously. So my expectation would be that this would be on the agenda as well.
Mhm.
And I'll just,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a always standing invitation, but if you have thoughts in between meetings, feel free to email me, call me, stop in, whatever it is. I'm happy to, help this go as far as we need to, as best as we can.
And Commissioner Flynn Post, you're a really talented process person. And so any ideas that you have pertaining to the comments and what you hope is process-wise we achieve or we engage in, an outline, chicken scratch, back of a napkin, getting those to Director Greepenschlag when they're on your mind and not months later would be really received well. I would appreciate it. And that goes for anybody else, but I just happen to know that you're very good with process. So, all right, anything else? All right, are there future items that you want us to be aware of, Director Greepenschlag?
No, we obviously have the zoning request before us and this, and I don't think there's any other applications on file, or initiatives that I'm working on that impact you. So
Okay, so procedural question, we can convene now that we've expressed interest in these housing opportunities. We don't have to have an application to convene.
correct.
This is now, we will be meeting because we have work to do.
Correct.
Excellent. So making that clear. So motion to adjourn, is that where we're at?
Yes.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Motion by President McKay, seconded by Josh Pollock. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned at 7:28 p.m. Thank you for your time, everyone.